Right. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna invert the transducer flux flow capacitor so that all of the plasma is actually counter-injected with negative energy, so that when we vent it from our Bassard scoops out into the nebula, there's going to be an ionization effect that's going to affect the free radicals within the subspace multispectral dimensional pocket. Yeah. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great Player. My name is Guy and today we're talking about metagame experts, or as I like to call them, bamboozlers of bodkins. Oh, you like to know your stuff about your genre, and as a result, you metagame whether you like it or not. Now, I am a huge sci-fi fan, so I love talking about inverted flux capacitors and ionizing the hull so that we defeat subspace pockets full of actinides, or whatever the case might be. If I have a GM who doesn't, and who isn't aware of all of those kinds of weird and wonderful terminologies, or can't throw the same problems back at my character, they get bamboozled, and so then the character usually gets away with it. It's a metagame problem which a lot of us have, and which I've seen creeping into the hobby a lot more than it used to be, as we start to apply our own real-world knowledge to situations in a fantasy environment, and it can cause a lot of problems. So hang on to your hats as we unpack, are you a metagame expert ass? Because you might very well be. I know I certainly am. So let's have a look. Let us see. Defining the features. So what are the features? So defining the feature. Great personal knowledge allows you to be a metagame ass. It allows you the capacity to have authority and dominion over your subject. And what that does is that it simply is too intimidating for anybody to fight against you. You might have, just absolute complete knowledge of the Roman Empire, and when you are playing in a game that involves a Romanesque style setting, when the characters go to a feast, your character has so much more knowledge about what that feast might be that they can manipulate it. They can manipulate the situation. Or they know the layout of a villa backwards. Oh, all villas had to have access to the aqueduct in order to have flowing sewer systems, so we can get in through that. Does your player character know that? Or do you as the player know that? You as the player know that, and you're applying that knowledge to your character. There is the age-old defense, well, if my character grew up in that environment, my character would know that. Not necessarily. In a science fiction environment, there is so much information out there. There is so much knowledge out there, and it's so specific to each starship, to each planet, to each physics system, to each universe, that there is a huge amount that character wouldn't know. In the past, unless literacy was a thing, and it was usually for those who had lots of money but not for the peasants, your character wouldn't know that. So, great personal knowledge is a source of metagaming. It happens. Practical experience. I spent a year as a wildlife cameraman tracking down the most dangerous animals on Earth in terms of African wildlife. I have been surrounded by buffalo, I have followed lions, I have sat in hides waiting for leopards to come into trees not more than 3 meters away from me, and I have ridden on elephants. I've been close to giraffe, I have been treed by a rhinoceros. It was a particularly nasty incident where I had to run away from a white rhino or die. It was not bigger than me, which was unusual. So that's great personal experience. It means that by being aware for a year, I am also very aware of how animals behave in the wild. Well, wild animals in Africa, anyway. So if the GM gives me an elephant and they say you hear the elephant breaking through the bush, I raise my hand. They're silent creatures. Their feet actually have soundproofing built in. It's a part of the foot structure is a soundproofing, sound muffling thing. Lions are roaring because they're hungry? No, they're not. They're not roaring because they're hungry. They are roaring because they are demarcating their territory. They're not hungry. If they're hungry, they are silently hunting. That's personal experience. I've ridden a horse, so I know what horse riding is like. I've gone to a LARP, so I know what sword fighting is like. In a general melee, you hit your friends just as much as you hit your enemies. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Everybody has personal experience in various fields and things. So personal experience is a big meta problem. And then the everyone knows because we watch television and movies and read books. Oh, well, everyone knows that you can spin a car around a corner whilst travelling at a certain velocity because they do it in movies all the time. Everybody knows that when I shoot the person with a shotgun, they're going to fly back 15 feet because that's what happens in the movies. It's not what happens in real life, by the way. You just drop. So the idea of this stuff, it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, and don't think for a moment that I am advocating that we are only allowed to roleplay ourselves in games, to completely wash away this metagame knowledge. So that it isn't metagame, it is what the character knows, because it's what you knows. You know. No, it's what you knows, that's what's important. It's what you know. Metagame knowledge is just knowledge, it's real life. It becomes meta when we start to use it to our advantage because our character just knows it. If the character has spent years and has wildlife survival training, then I'm entitled to use the knowledge that I have on wildlife survival training that I have gone through myself. If my character is a bookworm who has spent their entire life inside and the closest they've come to a pet is a Tamagotchi, who remembers those? Mine died. Yeah. Anyway, if that's their situation, they won't know what to do when they're being chased by a rhinoceros. They won't know the difference between a black rhino and a white rhino. They won't know what an elephant is about to do, if its ears are open or closed, if its tail is flapping or up or down, or all those kinds of symbols and signs they won't know. I can't use that to my advantage when my character is stuck in the wild. It just doesn't make sense. So those are the fine lines you need to start walking. So if you've got these, well, we all have these three things. We all have them. You're an expert in something. Somewhere along the line you're a fan, even if it's on Pokemon or whatever. It doesn't matter. This is it. This is a human condition. You can't avoid having this. So how do we do it? Let's say you know something because of great personal experience, or because you researched it, or because everyone knows. But your character probably wouldn't. How do you do it? How do you get your character to get there? Well, one of the tricks you can use is, let's say your character isn't an expert, but somebody else's is. If I'm there, let's say we're we're recreating Jurassic Park, and my character is one of the scientists who works in the lab, and somebody else is playing one of the big game hunters. That player has never hunted anything other than a cheeseburger. So I, who have been in many hunting situations, not hunting, just present and recording for legality and all those kinds of reasons, I have the knowledge. That player does not. I could ask a probing question of that player. My scientist could say, well, animals have very good sight and sense of smell, don't they? What do they smell for? I mean, do we smell different to them? It's a probing question, borderline meta-knowledge, but I think a scientist could work that out. It allows the player of the hunter to say to the GM, can I make a roll to see if animals hunt based on scent or not? Sure, make your survival roll, make your nature roll, make whatever roll you might need. You've used your metagame knowledge to then get everybody to coat themselves in animal dung and mud to mask their particular human scent. That's helped the party, that's moved the story along, that's allowed interaction to happen, it's made you a better role player because you've now engaged with a fellow NPC and a fellow player, and you have got that into that space. So probing questions are always really, really, really useful. Really powerful tool to improve your role-playing. Leading other PCs. Now, unlike a probing question, which is where you're trying to nudge a response, you're trying to get something. Leading other PCs is where you then say, all right, let's figure this out. You don't have the meta knowledge. You don't have the actual knowledge, but you know that some of the other players might do. The player characters might not. You can then say, okay, well, does anyone have a clue on how we should do this? Does anyone know what should be done in this particular situation? Yes, you do. Okay, cool. Let's lead us through that. You might have some players who are not proactive in terms of giving options, but they actually know options. So by leading others, by taking them on this journey where you're trying to problem solve, you can get there. If your character wouldn't do that, though, because we are talking meta, if your character is not the leader type, your character could go over to the leader of the party and say, I think you should ask everyone's opinion. Maybe someone knows something. I'm not going to do it, but maybe you can. Again, excellent role-playing because you are engaging your fellow players. Excellent role-playing because you are getting your other characters in the party to be involved and included and not just ignored. Working that meta-knowledge into the situation. You've now opened the door for the players to be able to turn to the GM and say, oh, that's a good point. My character's got, let's say, alchemy as a skill. Could I work out how to do this? Could I work out how to do that? It's a different application. It's a different way of, instead of just asking questions, it's prompting others to get it. It's leading the other PCs to the point where there is something that then can be emerged naturally and organically within the story, rather than just sitting back and saying, all right, everybody, who can solve this? Who's got a clue? Whose character's good at alchemy? Because mine's not, and I don't know what to do. That might be frustration as a player. What's your character going through? So think about that. Solutions. How to prevent yourself from metagaming using those three things. Self-check. Self-check. Ask yourself before you speak, would my character know this for the time period they're in, for the education level that they've had, for the experience that they've had? Would my character likely know this? If the answer is no, then you've got to go and use some of the other techniques. Ask others, engage, lead, play, figure out. So self-check. Make a character roll. The games that we play usually involve dice or cards or random numbers, doesn't matter. Make a self-check. You don't have to ask the GM. You don't have to say, oh, GM, I want to think, I have this knowledge. I want to know if my character has that knowledge as well, or if my character has an idea to do this or that. I have personally rock climbed. My character hasn't, but if my character is smart enough, I want to see if they can figure out how to use a piton and how to climb looking... Don't bother your GM with that. Just quietly roll, and if you get a number that you think is high enough for your character to have that, then you can voice it, and you can say, well, my character thinks, and I think this. And if the GM says, well, I'm not sure your character would know that, you can say, well, I rolled for my character to know that. GMs might not like that. GMs might not like that. Probe them beforehand. Say, hey, I've got some knowledge. My character doesn't have knowledge. Can I make a roll? If they say yes, then you can say, well, next time I have it, can I make a roll? And don't then just sit there rolling, going, oh, that thought didn't work. I have another thought. I have another thought. I have another thought. I keep thinking until I get the solution. That's not in the spirit of the game, in the slightest. And metagaming is not your first problem. So you can make a character roll. Nope, my character's not smart enough. This is particularly useful when you're playing characters whose abilities are less than your own. Oh, I'm playing a character who's not particularly charismatic. Okay, and I'm in an interaction with an NPC. Would my character know not to hold their hand for the entire duration of the interaction? Roll, no, they failed that check, so they're going to be socially awkward, or they're going to invade that personal space. That's why their charisma is so low. Things like that. And then the alternative is just ask other PCs. So ask them, hey, do you guys know how to deal with rhinoceroses? I don't. I do. My character doesn't know. Do any of you guys know? No, you don't. Okay, well, if nobody knows, there we go. None of us know. So we're screwed, basically. asking other PCs, hey, let's talk about this, let's work through this. Again, it's good role playing, it's character involvement, it's player involvement. That's what we want from role players. But it gives you some checking. It gives you some solutions against just metagaming and just going mad and yeah, basically just being an ass when it comes to metagame knowledge. So check yourself, make some rolls, make some decisions, but make sure that the character you're playing is appropriate for the information that you're going to try and disgorge into the group. If you can't separate yourself from your character, then it's time to start making your characters basically yourself. That sounds awfully deep for Sunday. When do these videos come out? Sunday night video. Anyway, until next time, let me know. What do you think about metagaming as a player? Do you think it's something that we need to worry about? Do you have fellow players who are experts in mechanics, and so when you try and make a check, they correct you because they know the right way to do it in the real world? Is that a thing? Do you have GMs who do the same thing but in the opposition? Oh no, you got to tell me, where do the spark plugs go? In the exhaust? Anyway, do you have those situations? What do you think about metagaming and knowledge? And how do you overcome it? What are your thoughts? Down below. Until next time, I wish you the happiest of playing. If we cross-link subjunction A with subjunction B, I like where you're going. I like where you're going with this. Yes. Yes, because then anethazine gas will be released from most of the venting ports on B deck, and that will allow us to then discharge a plasma burst from the conduits, igniting the anethazine gas. Anethazine doesn't ignite. It anesthetizes, and it's called anethazine. Really? It's a stupid name, and it knocks people out. So I don't subscribe to this whole idea of can I just roll? I'm going to ring the bell on this one. I'm ringing the bell on this one. I'm just rolling. Can we do it or not?